Far beyond the crowded colonies and metal worlds, there floated a quiet research outpost above the red clouds of Nereus 9. The place was silent, filled with the low hum of engines and the soft glow of instruments. To the alien scientist Aeltrin, this lonely outpost was her home of study and discovery. She was a being of grace, with translucent skin that shimmered like glass and wide golden eyes that could read emotion like light patterns. For months she had watched other species pass through this station, learning about how they spoke, worked, and bonded. But no species confused her more than the one called human. When the human transport ship docked that morning, Aeltrin waited at the airlock with her hands folded and her expression calm. The door opened with a hiss and out stepped Dr. Mason Hart, a man in a simple gray uniform with a smile that reached his eyes. He was not as tall or strong as she had imagined humans to be, but there was something in his posture, a quiet confidence, a gentle steadiness, that made her curious. Behind him came two others chatting softly, laughing even though they were in the presence of strangers. That to her was strange enough. "Welcome to Outpost Thallon," Aeltrin said in a clear voice. Her people were known for formality and she spoke with careful precision. "I am honored to assist with your research." Mason extended his hand at once. Aeltrin stared at it. Among her kind, physical contact meant the beginning of an emotional link, a bond that could merge thoughts and feelings for a lifetime. Breaking such a link could destroy the mind. To touch was sacred and dangerous, yet this human was smiling, his hand still waiting as if he expected her to take it with no fear at all. Slowly she reached out, her fingers brushing his palm. A spark, not of pain but warmth, passed between them. Aeltrin's eyes widened. The human did not recoil. He did not seem changed, injured, or overwhelmed. He simply nodded. "A pleasure, Doctor," he said softly, then stepped aside to help his crew with their cases. That small touch stayed with her for hours. Her mind turned it over like a scientist analyzing a rare mineral. Among her people, emotional bonds carried heavy risks. Once connected, their neural waves aligned so deeply that loss or distance could cause unbearable pain. Because of that, her species had learned to live carefully, keeping emotions steady and attachments shallow. But these humans, they formed connections freely. They spoke with warmth, laughed with ease, and parted without collapse. How could they do this without harm? Later, Aeltrin observed Mason's crew through the station's glass window as they ate together in the common area. One shared a story that made the others burst into laughter. Another spilled a drink, and instead of anger, there was more laughter, more teasing. She noted each reaction, writing carefully on her glowing tablet. Human bonding patterns are flexible. Emotional fluctuation observed, yet no signs of distress. Possible immunity. When Mason joined her later in the lab, she decided to ask directly. "Your people, you connect very easily," she said, "and then you disconnect also easily. Does it not cause harm?" Mason paused, considering her question. "You mean emotional harm?" he asked. "Yes, where I come from, bonds can break minds." He smiled faintly. "Then you'd think we'd be broken 100 times over," he said. "But no, we just keep going. I guess we learn from it," she tilted her head. "Learn from pain?" "Exactly. That's what makes us grow." His words did not fit into any rule she knew. In her world, pain was to be avoided, not studied. It was seen as proof of weakness. Yet here was this human, speaking of it as though it were a teacher. Aeltrin looked at him with quiet amazement. "You form bonds knowing they can hurt you," she whispered. "And you still choose to?" "Every time," Mason said simply. "Because sometimes it's worth it." That night, Aeltrin couldn't sleep. She stood by the observation window looking out at the red clouds swirling below. Her thoughts raced. How could any species be so willing to risk itself again and again? Her people had achieved peace through emotional control. No love too deep, no friendship too close, no grief too heavy. Yet the humans had found strength in the very things her species feared. When she closed her eyes, she remembered the warmth of Mason's handshake. Something small, yet powerful. It had not linked her mind to his, yet she could still feel it, as if his kindness had left a trace. Perhaps she thought the bond humans carried was not in the mind, but in the heart, an invisible connection that healed instead of harmed. As the stars drifted past outside, Aeltrin made her first report. The human condition appears paradoxical. Their emotional bonds do not weaken them. They seem capable of renewal after loss. This ability, and to bond again and again, may hold the key to emotional evolution. She stopped reading her own words, realizing her hand was trembling slightly. For the first time in her long scientific career, she was not only studying a subject, she was feeling it. And as the outpost lights dimmed for night cycle, Aeltrin whispered softly to herself, "How can they do it without harm?" She didn't know the answer yet, but she felt something awakening inside her, something bright and new, like the beginning of a human bond. The next morning, Aeltrin walked through the quiet halls of the outpost, her thoughts still tangled from the night before. She had not felt such curiosity in years. The humans were different. Their way of connecting was not logical, not careful, yet it seemed to give them something her own people lacked. She found herself drawn to watch them more closely, not just as subjects of study but as living mysteries. When she entered the research lab, Mason was already there, adjusting a device that glowed with a soft blue pulse. He greeted her with that same calm smile. "Morning, Dr. Aeltrin. Sleep well?" She hesitated. "I did not. I was thinking." "Thinking is good," he said lightly. That's usually how discovery begins. His simple tone surprised her. Her kind often spoke with precision and formality. Mason spoke like he was talking to an old friend. There was comfort in it. He handed her a small data tablet. "We'll be starting our emotional resonance study today. You'll get to see how we measure human bonding patterns through shared activity." "Activity?" she asked. "Conversation, cooperation, laughter," he said. "Things that make people feel connected." She frowned slightly. "Laughter does not create connection. It is only sound," Mason chuckled softly. "Then let's test that theory." Later that day, the humans gathered in the communal area for a routine meal. Aeltrin stood nearby, observing with her notepad ready. The crew passed food around, teasing one another, their words playful. A young engineer named Lena made a joke about Mason's cooking, and everyone laughed. The sound filled the room, light and contagious. Aeltrin noted every reaction, the smiles, the relaxed gestures, the bright tones. Something invisible passed between them, stronger than any energy wave she could measure. It was connection, real, deep, yet harmless. When Mason noticed her watching, he motioned for her to join them. "Come on, Doctor. You can't just study connection from behind a glass. Sit down." Reluctantly, Aeltrin took a seat. The food was strange to her and the smell made her blink, but she tried a small bite. The humans waited quietly for her reaction, smiling with curiosity. The taste was warm and earthy, not unpleasant. "It is edible," she said carefully. That made the crew burst into laughter again, and Mason nearly dropped his cup. "That's the highest praise we've gotten all week," he said. For a moment, Aeltrin felt something shift inside her. Not a bond, but a warmth spreading through her chest. The sound of laughter did not hurt. It did not overload her senses. Instead, it made her feel lighter, like she was part of something she didn't yet understand. After the meal, she followed Mason back to the lab. "When you share joy," she said slowly, "your emotional energy synchronizes. Yet no one loses balance." "How is that possible?" He shrugged. "We don't try to protect ourselves from feelings. We just let them happen. We trust that we'll be okay." "Trust," she repeated. The word sounded strange in her mouth. Among her kind, trust was rare, reserved for bonded pairs. Here, humans offered it freely. "And if it fails?" she asked. "Then we get hurt," Mason said simply. "But then we heal. And maybe next time we trust again." She turned to face him fully. "That is irrational." "Maybe," he said. "But it's also what keeps us human." For a long moment, Aeltrin stared at him, searching his expression for any sign of falsehood. There was none. He spoke with the same calm belief as someone explaining how to breathe. Later that night, she reviewed her notes again. Human emotional process, unstable yet regenerative, capable of recovering after damage. Unlike other species, they appear to gain resilience from repeated exposure to loss or conflict. She paused, setting the tablet down. How can such a fragile species survive through emotion alone? Her reflection in the window looked almost human in the dim light. Tired, curious, uncertain. She had spent her life studying emotion from a safe distance, but now she could feel it pressing closer, inviting her in. Over the next few days, she continued her observation sessions. Sometimes Mason's team argued. Sometimes they disagreed so strongly that their voices echoed down the hall. Eltrin would stand nearby expecting the emotional outburst to cause lasting damage. But every time something else happened, one of them would apologize, another would laugh, and balance would return. The connection did not break. It simply bent and reshaped itself. Finally, after one such disagreement, Eltrin approached Mason directly. "Your crew fought. I expected emotional collapse, but it did not happen. Instead, they grew closer." Mason leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "That's the funny thing about us," he said. "We don't stay broken. We change shape instead." His words stayed with her long after he left the room. She repeated them under her breath. "We don't stay broken." To her people, once something cracked, it was gone forever. But to humans, a break was only part of the story, a mark of survival. Before sleep, Eltrin sat in silence, thinking of her own kind. Her species had chosen safety over connection, logic over feeling. They had eliminated pain but also joy. Watching the humans, she began to wonder which path was wiser. In her final report of the day, she wrote a single line. "The strength of humans lies not in their resistance to pain, but in their ability to begin again." When she set her pen down, she realized she was smiling faintly, a rare, unstudied reaction. And though she did not yet understand the full meaning of it, she knew one thing with certainty. The humans had begun to change her. Gently, without even trying, days passed quietly on Outpost Thalen, and Eltrin found herself growing more fascinated with every small thing the humans did. She began to spend more time around them, sometimes without realizing it. The crew had become used to her silent presence, the way she stood with her silver eyes watching every smile, every word, every act of kindness that passed between them. To them, she was a scientist. To her, they were living wonders. One afternoon, Eltrin entered the common area where two human crew members, Lena and Carter, were working together on a damaged drone. Mason was away on a communications call. The air smelled faintly of oil and coffee, something the humans seemed to drink endlessly. At first, the two worked in calm harmony, but then something changed. A small argument began. "You overcharged the stabilizer," Lena said, frowning. "You always rush the process," Carter sighed. "Because if we don't get it working by tonight, Mason will—" "I don't care," she interrupted. "You never listen when someone gives you advice." The words hit sharply. The room grew tense. Eltrin stood still, observing. This was it. Emotional conflict, the very thing her people avoided at all costs. She expected them to withdraw, to break their working bond entirely. But instead, Carter rubbed the back of his neck and said softly, "You're right. I messed up. Let's fix it your way." Lena blinked in surprise. The anger faded from her face. "It's okay, I want it to work." "Then we'll make it work," he said, smiling faintly. Eltrin was frozen. Just minutes earlier, their bond had fractured, yet now it was repaired, not perfectly, but stronger. They continued their work, speaking more carefully, sharing small jokes again. To her, this was impossible. Emotional dissonance should have caused damage, yet they had recovered as if it were nothing. When Mason returned later, Eltrin went to him immediately. "Two of your crew argued," she said quickly. There was tension, but then they apologized and everything returned to balance. "How did they do that?" He smiled slightly. "They chose to forgive." "Forgive?" she repeated. "You mean they erased what happened?" "No," Mason said, shaking his head. They remembered, but they decided it was worth moving past. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing not to carry the pain anymore. His answer puzzled her deeply. Among her people, emotional wounds stayed forever. Bonds once cracked could never be whole again. To her, the idea of forgiveness was like saying water could flow uphill. That night, she stood by the observation window, looking at the distant stars. Her reflection looked almost human now, tired but thoughtful. She spoke softly to herself. How can they heal what is unseen? She pressed her palm to the glass, imagining the invisible energy that passed between humans so freely. Connection built from trust, broken by anger, and mended by forgiveness. It made no sense, yet she could not deny what she had witnessed. The next day, Mason invited her to join their maintenance shift on the outer decks. The crew needed to repair sensor panels exposed to space dust. Eltrin hesitated. Her people rarely worked in groups for long. Emotional blending could become overwhelming. But Mason insisted gently. "It'll be good for you to see how we cooperate under stress." She followed him through the narrow airlock, stepping out into the silver-blue glow of the outer deck. The stars stretched endless around them. They worked together, exchanging tools and brief words. When one panel stuck, Mason laughed instead of complaining. "Things never go as planned," he said. "But that's part of the adventure." "Adventure," Aeltrin repeated softly. "You mean disorder?" He grinned. "Disorder with purpose." For a moment, Aeltrin just watched him, this human who could turn frustration into humor. She didn't understand how such energy existed, how someone could face difficulty with lightness instead of fear. After the work was done, the crew gathered again in the common area. They were tired but cheerful, joking about small mistakes. Someone spilled a drink, and instead of anger, laughter filled the air again. Aeltrin sat quietly at the corner table, her tablet untouched. She wasn't taking notes anymore. She was simply feeling the warmth that filled the room, the gentle rhythm of shared voices. Later, Mason approached her. "You've been quiet," he said. "I have observed many things," she replied softly. "I saw bonds break and repair. I saw how forgiveness can erase pain. But I cannot understand why you risk it. Why form connections that can hurt you?" He looked thoughtful for a moment. "Because connection is what makes life worth living," he said. "Even when it hurts, it reminds us we're not alone." His words struck something deep within her. Not alone. She had lived her entire life surrounded by silence and control. No bonds, no risks. And yet in that silence she had always felt something missing. Something like emptiness disguised as peace. That night she could not write her report. Instead, she sat near the observation deck again, watching the stars flicker in the distance. For the first time, she wondered if maybe her people had misunderstood the meaning of safety. Perhaps safety without connection was not peace at all, but loneliness. As she closed her eyes, she could almost hear the sound of human laughter echoing in her mind. It did not fade even when she tried to silence it. It stayed, soft, warm, alive. She whispered to herself, "They bond again and again even after pain, and somehow they grow." The words felt strange but beautiful on her tongue. In that quiet moment, Aeltrin realized she was no longer just studying humans. She was beginning to change because of them, slowly, invisibly, the way stars shift in the night sky. And though she could not explain it, she felt certain that one day, she too would understand how humans could keep their hearts open, even after breaking. The following days on Outpost Thalen passed in a rhythm that felt strangely peaceful to Aeltrin. She found herself following Mason's crew wherever they went, not as a scientist anymore, but as a quiet observer of something she could not name. Every meal, every shared laugh, every act of kindness among them stirred questions in her heart that no data tablet could answer. One evening, Mason invited her to join him in the observation dome. The stars outside were brighter than usual, reflecting off the glass and painting the room in soft silver light. He sat beside her, holding 2 cups of steaming tea. "You should try it," he said. "It's made from a plant we grow on Earth, helps you think." She took the cup carefully. The scent was sweet, calming. "Your species uses warmth to connect," she said quietly. "You share food, you share drink, and in doing so, you form trust." Mason smiled. "You could say that. It's a small way of saying, 'You're welcome here.'" She nodded slowly, staring into the cup. "I have studied hundreds of species," she murmured. "None share emotions the way humans do. When others bond, it becomes permanent, dangerous, sometimes fatal if broken. But you connect and disconnect freely. You bond again and again. It should not be possible." Mason leaned back, watching the stars. "Maybe it's because we don't see love or friendship as something that must last forever. We just give it while it's there, and when it ends, we carry the memory instead of the pain." Aeltrin turned toward him. "But you feel pain." "I have seen it. I have seen tears." He nodded. "Yes, we hurt. But pain is not the end of the story. It's part of what helps us grow stronger. It reminds us that our hearts still work." His words lingered in her mind like gentle echoes. Her kind had spent centuries building a world without emotional pain. Bonds were restricted, emotions were muted, and memories were carefully controlled. They had peace, but it was cold peace and unchanging, empty. She wondered for the first time if her people had given up too much in exchange for safety. That night, while Mason's team slept, Aeltrin returned to her quarters and activated her private journal. The blue light flickered across her face as she recorded her thoughts. Humans display a unique emotional elasticity, she said softly. They do not fear connection even after loss. Pain is not a disease for them. It is a sign of life. Perhaps it is not immunity they possess, but courage. She paused, feeling a strange tremor inside her. For the first time, she hesitated before saving her entry. She wasn't sure if she was still writing as a scientist or as something else entirely. The next morning, Aeltrin joined Mason in the hydroponics bay. Rows of green plants stretched along the glass, glowing faintly under artificial sunlight. He was trimming leaves with careful precision. "You enjoy this work," she said. "It's peaceful," he replied. "It reminds me of home. Everything that grows here starts small and fragile. But if you take care of it, it finds a way to survive." She ran her fingers lightly over a leaf, even after it's cut. "Especially after," he said, smiling. "The cutting makes room for new growth." The thought struck her again, the same human idea she could not fully understand. Growth through loss, healing through pain. It defied every law her people believed in. Yet standing there beside him, she felt that maybe the humans were not wrong after all. Later that day, a small accident happened in the lab. A power surge caused the lights to flicker and the main terminal to crash, wiping several hours of data. Aeltrin expected frustration or anger, but the crew simply sighed and began working together to restore the files. Mason gave instructions calmly, even joking about how the universe liked to keep things interesting. When the lights stabilized, Lena smiled at Aeltrin. "We'll redo the readings tomorrow." "No big deal," Aeltrin blinked. "You lost valuable data." "Sure," Lena said. "But we learned something while doing it. That's what matters." That simple acceptance left Aeltrin speechless. Her people would have punished themselves for such an error. But here humans treated mistakes as part of progress. Failure didn't destroy them. It taught them. That evening, she found Mason in the quiet lounge, writing on a tablet. "You never seem afraid of loss," she said softly. He looked up with a gentle smile. "Fear never stops it from happening," he said. "So we choose to keep trying even when it hurts. That's the only way we keep hope alive." "Hope," she repeated. "We do not use that word. We believe in certainty." "Then you miss the beauty of uncertainty," he said kindly. "Hope is what makes the unknown worth facing." Aeltrin stood silently, her heart heavier than before. For her species, certainty was comfort, but now it felt like a cage. She realized she was beginning to envy these humans, their ability to fall, break, forgive, and begin again. Later, when she returned to her quarters, she looked at her reflection. The golden light of the stars framed her face, and for the first time, she smiled without reason. It felt strange, uncontrolled, and yet it felt right. She whispered to herself, "We live our lives avoiding pain, but they live by embracing it. Maybe that is what makes them truly alive." She recorded one last note before sleeping. Humans are not fragile. They are renewal itself. Their bonds are not permanent, yet their hearts endure beyond every break. Their resilience is not physical. It is Aeltrin. We could use an extra hand in the control deck. A few systems are acting up again. She walked there quickly. When she entered, she saw Mason leaning over the console with a frown, while the rest of his team worked on nearby terminals. The lights flickered softly above them. Aeltrin moved closer and studied the flashing readings. "Power flow in Section 4 is unstable," she said. "Your circuits are mismatched." Mason grinned. "You're getting good at this." She gave a small tilt of her head, something close to a smile. "Observation improves accuracy." "Observation, huh? I think you're starting to enjoy it." He teased lightly. Aeltrin's golden eyes glowed faintly. "Perhaps," she said, her tone soft but uncertain. Hours passed as they worked together. The air around them was filled with quiet conversation and gentle laughter. When the systems finally stabilized, Mason leaned back in his chair and stretched. "There we go. I think we've earned a break." The crew began preparing a small meal. They invited Aeltrin to join them again. She hesitated as always, but Mason waved her over with a warm gesture. "Come on, Doctor. You're part of the team now? Part of the team?" Those words made her chest tighten. No one from her species had ever said that to her. Her kind worked alone, avoiding emotional overlap. But here she was surrounded by voices, smiles, and warmth that reached beyond logic. As they ate, the talk turned personal. Carter asked Mason about Earth, and he began describing it with fond eyes. Blue skies, oceans, wind that smelled of rain. Aeltrin listened in silence, imagining such a world. "It sounds full of feeling," she said softly. "It is," Mason said. "Earth isn't perfect. It hurts sometimes, but that's what makes it beautiful." She looked down at her hands, thinking of her own home. Silent cities filled with calm faces and emotionless voices. No pain, but also no joy. She began to realize how empty it truly was. Later that evening, Mason found her alone in the observation dome. The stars shone like silver dust across the void. She didn't speak as he approached. She simply stared at the endless light beyond the glass. "You've been quiet lately," he said gently. "Something on your mind?" "Yes," she whispered. "I am confused. Your people form bonds that can be broken. You feel sorrow, fear, love, yet you do not protect yourselves from it. You allow it to happen again and again. Why?" He leaned against the railing beside her. "Because every bond teaches us something new. If we closed ourselves off, we'd stop learning who we are. Every hurt leaves a mark, but it also leaves wisdom." Aeltrin turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Your heart can break many times and still function?" He smiled faintly. "Not just function, and it grows stronger." She looked down, trying to understand. "My kind, we do not know how to heal from such things. If we lose someone, it destroys us, so we stopped loving deeply long ago." "That sounds lonely," Mason said quietly. "It is peaceful," she replied, then paused. "But yes, also lonely." There was silence between them. The hum of the station was the only sound. Aeltrin's hands tightened around the edge of the railing. "I think I am beginning to feel something similar to what you call connection. It is strange. It feels like both light and weight at the same time." Mason looked at her kindly. "That's what connection is. It's the weight of caring, and the light of being cared for." She looked at him for a long moment. For the first time, she truly smiled. It was small, but it reached her eyes. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple," Mason said. "It just starts small, like trust." The next few days, Aeltrin helped more than she observed. She worked side by side with the humans, laughed at their jokes, and even shared stories from her own world, though she softened the sad parts. The more time she spent with them, the more she realized she was no longer afraid of feeling. She wanted to understand it fully. Then one evening, while reviewing her notes, she realized something strange. Her readings showed faint emotional resonance between herself and Mason, a soft wave of shared empathy. It was not the dangerous kind her people feared, not the deep neural bond that could destroy the mind. This was different, gentle, alive, and safe. She whispered to herself, "I am bonded." But she felt no pain, no danger, only calm. Her pulse quickened as she wrote in her report. "It is possible to form a bond that heals instead of harms. The human's way of connecting does not merge minds, it aligns hearts." When Mason came by later, she showed him the data. He looked at her with a quiet smile. "Looks like you discovered something new," he said. "I did not expect to be part of the experiment," she admitted. He chuckled softly. "The best discoveries usually happen that way." Aeltrin looked down, then said in a low voice, "It feels incredible." One morning, Mason was calibrating a sensor panel when Aeltrin entered the lab. He looked up and smiled. "Good timing. I was just thinking I could use your help." She stepped closer, her golden eyes reflecting the glow of the machines. "You require precision adjustments?" "Exactly," he said. "You've got steadier hands than me." Aeltrin focused on the delicate circuits, her movements calm and exact. Mason watched her work quietly for a moment before saying, "You know, you've changed since the day we arrived." She glanced at him. "Changed?" "Yeah," he said with a light smile. "You laugh more. You talk more. You even make jokes sometimes." "I do not make jokes," she said seriously, then paused as his grin widened. "Perhaps, sometimes," Mason laughed softly. "That's progress." Aeltrin tilted her head. "I do not feel like a different being, yet everything feels different inside." She placed a hand lightly on her chest. "It is as if I understand things I could never measure before." He nodded slowly. "That's what connection does. It changes how you see the world." For a moment, they stood in quiet. The machines hummed softly. Aeltrin's gaze drifted toward the window where distant stars shimmered like frozen sparks. When I was young, she said, I asked my mentor why we were forbidden to feel deeply. He told me that emotions destroy reason. I believed him. Now I see that reason without emotion is only half of life. Mason smiled. I think you just discovered what most humans spend a lifetime learning. Later that day, the outpost systems began to flicker again. A minor power surge passed through the communication grid. Aeltrin and Mason worked side by side, rerouting circuits and checking connections. Their hands brushed once as they reached for the same cable, and for a heartbeat, a soft current of warmth moved between them. Not physical, but something deeper, invisible. Aeltrin froze, her pulse quickening. You felt that, Mason said quietly. Yes, she whispered. It was like resonance, he nodded. That's the word. She stepped back slightly unsure. Her people feared resonance more than anything. A bond like that could mean shared emotion, shared pain. But there was no pain here, only calm. It was as if her heart had found an echo in another being's rhythm. When the system stabilized, Aeltrin walked to the viewing deck alone. She stood there for a long time, staring at the endless sky. She could feel the faint pulse of connection between herself and Mason even now, like a thread of soft light. It was not control, not dependency, just understanding. She whispered, You can bond again, without harm. The words left her mouth like a prayer. Incredible. That night, she dreamed for the first time in many years. She saw her home world, tall silver towers, silent faces, endless calm. But now it looked empty, hollow. Then she saw Earth through Mason's eyes, oceans, laughter, people embracing in sunlight. The two images blended, and she felt a deep ache. When she woke, there were tears on her cheeks, something she had never experienced before. The next morning, she went to Mason. I had a dream, she said softly. It showed me what my people have lost. Mason listened quietly. We removed pain to protect ourselves, she continued. But we also removed joy. We do not break, but we also do not grow. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Maybe you can show them another way. She looked at him, uncertain. Would they listen? They might, he said, if they see what it's done for you. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them was warm, alive with unspoken understanding. Aeltrin realized that this connection, this quiet bond, was proof of everything she had been searching for. It did not weaken her. It gave her strength. Later that evening, the crew gathered to share dinner before the long transmission shift. Mason raised his cup. To new discoveries, he said with a grin. To discovery, the others echoed. Aeltrin lifted her own cup slowly. Her hand trembled slightly. And to connection, she added softly. The others smiled at her, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged somewhere. As the laughter and chatter filled the room, Aeltrin closed her eyes briefly, feeling the pulse of the moment, the simple, fragile joy of being part of something greater than herself. It was not an experiment anymore. It was life. That night, she added one final entry to her report. The human heart is not immune to pain. It transforms it. Connection is not weakness. It is renewal. I have witnessed it and I have felt it. I no longer study it from afar. I am part of it. She saved the entry, then looked out at the stars once more. The cold, distant light no longer felt empty. It felt alive, like 1,000 quiet bonds stretching across the universe. And when Mason's voice called her name from the hallway, she turned toward it with a calm smile. For the first time, Aeltrin did not fear what she might feel. She was ready for it. Ready to live, ready to connect, ready to begin again. The day of Aeltrin's presentation arrived quietly. The research station had linked with the Interplanetary Ethics Council through a live holo transmission. Every detail had been prepared with care. The data charts, the visual models, even the neural resonance scans that showed her findings. Yet as Aeltrin stood before the glowing console, her hands trembled. This was not just another scientific report. It was a truth that had changed her life. Mason and his crew stood nearby, giving her silent encouragement. He nodded once, the same calm look in his eyes that always gave her courage. She took a deep breath and began to speak. Members of the council, she said clearly, her voice calm but soft. My name is Aeltrin of the Thalen outpost. For many months I have studied the species known as humans. What I have found is unlike anything recorded in our emotional or biological archives. Her image projected across the galaxy to a hall filled with pale, shimmering beings, her own kind. Their faces were expressionless, their golden eyes fixed on her. She continued, "Human connection operates differently than ours. They form emotional bonds easily, through words, gestures, shared laughter. These bonds can be broken, yet the human mind does not collapse. Instead, they heal and they form new ones. This ability is not a flaw. It is evolution." Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. One elder leaned forward. "You claim they can survive repeated emotional bonding without neural decay?" "Yes," Aeltrin said. "Not only survive, they become stronger." For a long moment there was silence. The council members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Then one asked, "And what of you, Aeltrin? Have you experienced this? Human bonding yourself?" Aeltrin hesitated. Her eyes flickered toward Mason. "Yes," she said at last. "I have, and it did not harm me. It made me whole." The elder who led the session leaned back in thought. "If what you say is true, it will change our understanding of emotional structure forever." "It must," Aeltrin replied softly. "Because if we continue to live without connection, we will continue to exist, but not truly live." The transmission ended after long questioning and careful debate. The council promised to review her data, but as the holographic light faded, Aeltrin's knees felt weak. She turned toward Mason and he caught her hand before she could stumble. "You did great," he said gently. "You spoke from the heart," she smiled faintly. "I was not certain they would listen." "Even if they don't," Mason said, "you've planted the first seed. Seeds take time to grow." She looked at him for a long moment. "Your people always speak of growth. Even in failure, you find something living. That's what keeps us going," he said. "We believe tomorrow can be better." That evening, the crew celebrated quietly in the observation dome. The stars outside were endless, glowing softly through the glass. Lena played soft music from her tablet, and Carter joked that Aeltrin's report would probably start a revolution in a week. Aeltrin didn't fully understand the word revolution, but she laughed anyway, her laughter mixing with theirs easily now. Later, Mason joined her at the window. They stood side by side, watching a nearby nebula swirl in faint blues and reds. "Do you think your people will change?" he asked. "I hope so," she said. "If they do not, perhaps one day they will learn the way I did, by meeting humans." He smiled. That would be something. For a while they stood in silence. The soft hum of the outpost wrapped around them like calm air. Aeltrin turned slightly toward him. "When I first met you," she said, "I believed your people were careless with emotion. I thought you broke yourselves too easily. Now I see, you do not break. You bend and then you rise again." Mason looked at her gently. "That's humanity in a sentence," she nodded. "It is beautiful." The lights dimmed as night cycle began. The stars outside shimmered like tears frozen in the void. Aeltrin pressed her hand lightly against the glass. "I never thought I could feel without fear," she whispered. "But now I do." Mason's voice was quiet. "That's the greatest discovery you could have made." She turned to him, her golden eyes soft and bright. "You were right," she said. "Connection is not weakness. It is life." For a moment their gazes met, full of the quiet understanding that needed no translation. When Mason left to check the control deck, Aeltrin remained by the window. She thought of her home world, her people, the countless generations that had chosen silence over feeling. She thought of the laughter she had shared, the forgiveness she had witnessed, and the strange, gentle bond she now carried inside her. Her final log entry glowed softly on the console beside her. She read it aloud in a whisper. "Humans have shown me that to feel is not to fall. It is to rise again with greater depth. Their resilience comes from their ability to love, lose, and love again. They are not fragile. They are infinite." As she finished, a quiet smile formed on her face. Beyond the glass, a comet streaked past the horizon, a trail of light against the endless dark. Aeltrin whispered one last time, her voice full of awe and peace. "You can bond again? Without any harm. Incredible." And for the first time in her long, careful life, she felt not as a researcher or an observer, but as something entirely new, alive, connected, and human at heart.